Adobe Flash, the media creation platform solely responsible for many internet phenomenons, trends, and high-quality games and animations. Flash had a massive impact on internet culture and media as a whole, more so than I think most people realize. I'm sure we've all had experiences with Flash before, whether it was playing games on the numerous game hosting sites like Newgrounds, Congregate, Cool Math Games, and whatever else, and to watching the many animations made with Flash. Flash, for the better part of the 2000s and some of the 2010s, was practically the internet, and it was integral to the success of numerous people, leaving behind a legacy so big that it continues to linger to this day, inspiring the minds of the first generation to grow up with the internet, and even beyond. Of course though, you can't discuss the significance Flash had on culture and media without addressing most likely the biggest elephant in the room. An elephant so big that it's a huge part of why this website became as big as it is today, and I likely wouldn't be here if it weren't for this craze. I present to you the Flash game phase of early YouTube, full of top of the mornings and my name is PewDiePie's, alongside excessive screaming and overall raw emotion. If it weren't for these Flash games, neither YouTube nor YouTubers like Jacksepticeye, PewDiePie, and Markiplier would be anywhere near as big as they are now. The one that played the biggest role in this was a seemingly humble yet gory game called Happy Wheels. The game was simply about just getting to the end of each level of any of the numerous characters you had at your disposal, but it went on to become as big as it was because of simply how fun it was. The controls were good, the ragdoll and gore was oh so satisfying. I'm not a psychopath, I promise. And the biggest appeal was the fact that users were able to create their own levels. You sometimes found levels that were incredibly creative and well made, and then other times you got whatever this is. The variety played a big role in the fun factor of the game, and it made it a very popular target game for Let's Play YouTubers. And I was one of the kids who loved watching these Happy Wheels videos for all they were worth, and I always dreamed of one day becoming a YouTuber like that myself. I ended up becoming a video essayist, but I bet I can channel my inner Let's Play YouTuber energy right now. Let's try it.
What's up everybody, it's BrianTheBrain, and welcome back to some more Happy Wheels! Oh god, ah!
Alright, got that off my chest, let's move on. Besides Happy Wheels, there was also those fandangled rage games that were all the, well, rage around the time Happy Wheels was also popular. Let me tell you, if you thought that Happy Wheels videos were full of emotion, then I don't think you're ready to see the sheer amount of anger that is emitted out of these people when playing games like QWOP and the Impossible Quiz. It can get very heated, very fast.
And I don't know why the fuck people play this, it's fucking retarded! Look at him! Go forward, you fucking idiot!
But of course, the anger was part of the viewer's entertainment. Just seeing these people that we are used to watching and know of their established personalities, playing these games and showing a side of themselves that most of us have never seen up until that point. It was interesting in the sense that these games seemed simple at first, but when you actually watch someone play them or even play them yourself, you immediately come to realize that these games are the pure embodiment of the word unfair. But you keep playing the game or keep watching the person play the game because you don't want yourself or that other person to admit defeat to the game, and want to see more of what it has to offer when it comes to its difficulty. After all, that's a big part of why people like to play these games, to overcome difficult challenges and grow as a player. The same goes for watching someone play a game, because you get to see someone else go through that very same journey of overcoming the game and getting better as a player. That's the biggest reason why these games took off the way they did, and most of these were made in Flash. The genre got so big that it expanded to higher production values, giving us games like Getting Over It by Bennett Foddy, who had also made QWOP before. This game was another tall pillar in the internet rage game craze, and chances are, it wouldn't have even existed if Bennett Foddy didn't get a start with QWOP. Besides Happy Wheels and internet rage games, another series that YouTube owes big time for its popularity and success is the Henry Stickmin games. These were basically point-and-click choose-your-own adventure games that had multiple endings based on what options you chose in each route, and these were incredibly fun. It was hilarious seeing what kinds of fails there were in these games, whether it was 360 no-scoping your partner, getting a nut shot, or getting screwed over by gadgets. A big part of the fun was not even getting to the end of the routes, but by simply seeing all the animations the game has to offer. Just like the aforementioned games, it was no stranger to internet fame, accumulating millions of plays on websites like Newgrounds, and getting a ton of Let's Play videos by famous YouTubers, and allowing the developer of the games, Puffballs United, to have a platform to improve his skills, eventually becoming the co-founder of Innersloth. Soft, an indie studio that then went on to create the Henry Stickmin collection, which contained remastered versions of the original games, alongside a brand new game called Completing the Mission, and most importantly when talking about the subject of internet culture and media, created Among Us, the biggest trend back during the days of having to stay inside to avoid the skill issue disease. It's hard to really put into scale just how massive Among Us was during its heyday. Practically every well-known YouTuber you can think of was playing the game for videos, from people like the OGs of the Flash game era, Moist Critical, Mr. Beast, and numerous others. To think too, that if it weren't for Puffballs United for improving his skills with Henry Stickmin, we most likely never would have gotten Among Us at all. An entire huge piece of internet culture was created by Flash's influence. There's still way more to Flash's influence and legacy besides its huge role in making YouTube as popular as it is. You thought that was the only influence Flash games had on the internet? Oh no. Nah. That's just the tippity top of the biggest iceberg that you'll ever see. When we go a little bit deeper, we will find a whole cavalcade of games that had their own influences and impact. And amongst this huge roster of games, one of the most important to consider would be Super Smash Flash. At its core, the game is very simple and, well, not very well made in retrospect, but this game is what would eventually spawn its sequel, Super Smash Flash 2, and its many versions, spanning all the way to the modern day with version 1.3, with its massive roster of characters and stages, alongside its controls that do a good job in capturing what makes Smash so fun. The creator of the game, Gregory McLeod, would eventually go on to found McLeod Gaming, who are currently working on Frame Makers, our early access 2D platformer fighter that takes its roots from Super Smash Flash, and shows a lot of promise with its ambition and scale. Another series of games that will later on lead to its developer moving to releasing games on Steam would be the Pappas games. There is a ton of these games, and the basic premise is just about running a restaurant owned by the man himself, Papa Louie, and the only thing that changes is the kind of food that you're making. There's one about making burgers, there's one about making tacos, there's one about making wings, and quite a few others. But the one that started it all was Papa's Pizzeria. Honestly, whenever I hear the words Cool Math Games, I immediately think of the Papa's series. And Papa's Pizzeria and Burgeria were definitely to thank for that. A big part of the fun was making the most diabolical meal imaginable, and then serving it to the customer to see their reaction. They have since become so big that Papa's Pizzeria and Papa's Freezeria both got completely remastered and released on Steam. There's also Toss the Turtle, a game all about simply shooting a turtle out of a cannon and seeing how far you can go, gaining money based on how many obstacles you've hit and how far you went, so you can buy upgrades to go even further than before. This game is a ton of fun, and even got a sequel called Super Toss the Turtle in 2016, free to download on iOS and Android. The game was a smash hit on Newgrounds, leading to the existence of games that try to take its concept and do its own thing with it, such as games like Learn to Fly and Burrito Bison, which were also popular in their own right. You know, speaking of games that were smash hits that led to their genre getting more popular, it would be a disservice to a video like this if I didn't talk about just how massive Bloons Tower Defense was. These games about monkeys popping balloons absolutely exploded in the internet space, and you'd never think that games with such a simple premise would be able to achieve that, but these games have way more to them than meets the eye. These games took off for a reason, and it's because they are incredibly addicting and in a fun way. Seeing how strong your monkey pals can become, seeing what kinds of upgrades you'll get next, seeing what kinds of balloons you'll have to encounter, and seeing how much of a mess the screen can become after a few dozen rounds. Like seriously, what is even going on here? It was all part of the addicting fun that these games offered, and these games just kept adding more and more gameplay mechanics to keep the overall experience fresh. These games never grew stale and complacent, they improved with each entry. The series eventually progressed all the way to Bloons Tower Defense 6, the first mainline entry not made in Flash and with a very different art style, but that fire the series always had wasn't extinguished because of the death of Flash. If anything, it's a fire that is just as strong as it was in the 2000s and 2010s. Bloons Tower Defense 6 still has a big community surprisingly, and since its release in 2018, has continued to receive spin-offs such as Bloons Tower Defense Battles 2 and Bloons Cars Storm. Bloons, as a franchise, is big in its own regard, and naturally, its success meant that there would be a ton of games that tried to capitalize on that success, and this tower defense genre soon became a craze. There's a ton of these games, and it would be too long to list them, but some of these games do a good job at capturing what made Bloons so fun. Success naturally breeds offshoots of that success, and that is incredibly obvious to see when considering another huge side of Flash games that made big impacts on internet culture and media, and that is the entire 2D Flash platformer scene. Any of you guys remember a little game called Ultimate Flash Sonic? It was basically a recreation of the Sonic Advance games, but simply done within Flash. Looking back on it, it hasn't held up all that well, its controls are pretty clunky and there's some glitches here and there, but it was an important foundation for Flash-made 2D platformers. Around the same time Ultimate Flash Sonic was made, there was a game called N, The Way of the Ninja, that was incredibly fun. It was basically going through these obstacle courses of death as a ninja, and these bite-sized levels made the game very replayable and easy to consume. Just 2 years after the release of Ultimate Flash Sonic and N, however, was the release of Fancy Pants Adventure World 1. This game was the gold standard on how Flash 2D platformers should be made. Well, with its great animation, its fluid controls, and its great level design, this game was incredibly impressive for 2006 Flash. It would go on to become a series, with World 2, World 3, World 4, getting ports to home consoles, and even getting an entire full-blown game on Steam in 2017 with Super Fancy Pants Adventure, which is everything good about Fancy Pants and more. The groundwork that was established with the first game was heavily influential for aspiring game developers who too wanted to make Flash 2D platformers, and its innovation is what led to games such as Fireboy and Water Girl, Super Mario 63, Run, Exopath, Meat Boy, and numerous other Flash 2D platformers to be as good as they were. When talking about innovation within the Flash game scene though, and hell, Flash as a whole, it's practically essential to bring up the many projects that Tom Fulp, the creator of Newgrounds and one of the biggest people behind why Flash kicked off as much as it did, had made. Tom Fulp founded Newgrounds on July 6, 1995, with the intention of providing a platform for up-and-coming developers to publish their works and improve their skills. And many of the people who contributed to Newgrounds would then go on to become independent game developers, starting their own companies, and overall taking their career to the next level. It's why it's called Newgrounds. It was one of the first social websites where people can connect with others and feel like they're a part of a big community that only grew bigger and stronger. Its success can be largely contributed to the many high-quality Flash games and animations that were released on the platform, and one of the major players in that regard was two of Tom Fulp's own works, Pico School and Alien Hominid. Pico School was a point-and-click adventure game, being unlike anything Flash had seen prior. Its polished and complex design was a major driving force in its success, and it has set the standard for Flash creations as a whole. 3 years later after the release of Pico School, Tom Fulp released Alien Hominid, a 2D run-and-gun shooter that was brutally hard but incredibly fun. So fun in fact, that its following that it had got eventually led to the game getting ports for the PS2 and GameCube. Both of these games, especially Pico School, played a huge part in making Newgrounds as big as it was, and in turn, making Flash as big as it became. Tom Fulp would then go on to make games that were released on Steam and home consoles, such as Castle Crashers and Battle Block Diver, games that have the trademark Newgrounds energy in spades. On the topic of Newgrounds, I think would make the perfect segue to start discussing the other half of what made Flash so impactful, and that is its many animations. It's hard to be able to pinpoint animation that I should begin with, but I think a very fitting one would be the Animator first animation series, that somehow still goes on to this day. In fact, the latest one was just a month ago at the time of the making of this video, with Animation vs Addiction. These were basically short animations where a drawing comes to life and starts attacking its creator in their computer, and these were always so entertaining to watch. Just seeing what kinds of things the animation would use against the animator and the batshit insanity of it all made each video worth the watch. All of the main animations have over millions of views. It was a big contributor to the whole fight animation genre that was popularized by the series and others like it. You have such animations like Madness Combat, where it's entirely just badass dudes doing badass things, with great choreography and fluid animation, and the main villain is some clown guy for some reason. Don't question it though, just keep on watching Hank murder all these dudes. The latest one was released 6 months ago at the time of the making of this video, and there's 17 episodes in total. It's still going strong to this day, and has since gained a massive following, accumulating millions of views on both YouTube and Newgrounds. I would be remiss to not mention another massive part of the fight animation genre in this video, and when it's all combined, probably played the biggest part in the genre's success. I say probably because it's hard hard to top Animator vs. Animations popularity, but it's definitely up there for sure at least. This part of the fight animation genre is a subgenre that I like to call sprite fights. Say Mario and Luigi vs. Goku and Vegeta, or any other crossover. The biggest of these, however, would definitely have to be Super Mario Bros. C. This animation series is an absolute legend. What for its brilliant fight choreography, its rather good story for how many characters there are, the characters themselves, and the absolute opposing threat that Mega Sonic served within the narrative. I would rewatch these all the time as a kid, just for the fight choreography alone, and it's a big part of what inspired me to become a more creative person. Brawl on a Vanishing Island has to be one of the best fight animations I've ever seen come out of Flash, and honestly, even when compared to non-Flash animations, it still holds its own incredibly well. It sadly ended off on a cliffhanger with episode 8, but it has since gotten a reboot that currently spans to 2 episodes, and the animations there have dramatically improved. The man behind it all, Mark Haynes, can practically be considered the grandfather of the sprite fight genre, and even during the time the original Super Mario Bros. C was popular, there was numerous other sprite fights that try to capture the raw amount of testosterone that emitted from the series, and a lot of these are good in their own way. Super Mario Bros. C was so influential that even to this day, sprite fights continue to be made, and let me just say, a lot of these modern ones are even more crazy than Super Mario Bros. C. Like, you have this one series called Battle of Sprites, made by Space P, and it's basically the cast of Super Mario Bros. C alongside Goku and Vegeta, and a few other characters, and there's moments like the Mario Bros. Using Sonic's hyper form, Fire Fleetway Sonic beating the shit out of Mario, and all this other insanity. It makes me feel a little bit old watching these, which is funny because I'm only 20 years old, because there's so much going on, and I already thought Super Mario Bros. C was crazy for what it was. Nonetheless, this series and the many animations that are inspired by Super Mario Bros. C are of high quality, and it warms my prefrontal cortex seeing that the spirit of the sprite fight continues to thrive to this day. Within the same vein as these sprite fights, this other subgenre coexisted with them, and was popularized by animations like Animator vs. Animation, and that was the truckload of stick fights. You had animations like Xiao, Slush Invaders, Shock, and countless others, and a lot of these were more down to earth, opposed to the hyperactive Dragon Ball C like sprite fights, having choreography closer to the likes of old martial arts movies and The Matrix. If you wanted something a bit more laid back, but still action packed, these were for you. Stick fights are still widely made to this day, and it's funny to think that it all started with these Flash animations. Trust me though, there's still way more to Flash animations besides fighting. One of the most popular series of animations that has nothing to do with fighting at all were the animations made by Aaron Hansen, otherwise known as Egoraptor. You may know Aaron Hansen nowadays as the face of Game Grumps, but I personally know Aaron Hansen as the Egoraptor who made such Newgrounds classics as Metal Gear Awesome. Metal Gear Awesome was basically a parody of the Metal Gear Solid series, and it became very famous for its random, absurdist humor. It became so famous in fact, that practically anything Egoraptor made afterwards always got front page on Newgrounds shortly after it released. This included the sequel to Metal Gear Awesome, and the Awesome compilation animations. These animations started his internet career, and in addition to being a voice actor for some games and shows, like I had mentioned before, he would eventually go on to create Game Grumps, which has since gotten 5.44 million subscribers. If it weren't for his start on Newgrounds, chances are that he wouldn't have started Game Grumps and wouldn't have become a voice actor. I think it's time to get into something a little more gruesome. Seemingly cute, but full of gore and bodily harm, Happy Tree Friends is the perfect, it's not what you expect, cartoon. This Flash web series is all about these cute little animals doing something normal, and then all of a sudden, bam, your eye falls out, gets chopped in half, and is used to make some lemonade. A big part of the appeal was seeing what kind of shenanigans these animals would get into, and what kind of injuries they would sustain. It's like a parody of cartoons such as Hello Kitty, where it looks like it's going to have a typical plot structure of a kid-friendly cartoon, and then you watch more of it, and then you see one of the animals get brutally killed. The Flash web series became so big that eventually it got an entire TV series with all of the gore still intact. Gotta say, even nowadays, these are still pretty entertaining to watch, even if I already know what's gonna happen in some of them. I can see why this web series took off as much as it did. Speaking of web series, who could forget the Homestar Runner animations? These followed the characters of Strongbad and Homestar Runner, alongside the surrealist humor that made these animations take off as much as they did. There were numerous spin-offs and such, but the most popular one is definitely the Strongbad email series. These animations were about Strongbad answering emails from fans, and these emails were usually the prompts to the plot of the episode itself, or sometimes even branching off from the initial email. These animations started to get traction around 2002, and the creators, the Brother Chaps, were able to make this one small series of animations into a big franchise, spawning web games, an entire console game, and even featuring in Poker Night at the Inventory, alongside characters like Heavy from TF2 and Max from Sam & Max. The franchise continues to this day, and the most recent animation was made 6 days ago at the time of the making of this video, with over 428,000 views. I think that just about wraps up the most important games and animations in the Flash sphere. There's of course a ton of other games and animations that all had their own impacts to some degree, but I simply want to go over the most major ones, and really put into scale the legacy Flash had left behind, how much it shaped internet culture and media, how it influenced future creations that weren't made in Flash, and to show that Flash is more important than most people realize. I certainly wouldn't be here today if it weren't for all the creations these passionate artists made. Their work was a big part of my childhood, and really helped me expand my own imagination. I'm sure it was the same way for you too, and even if you didn't grow up with Flash and still watch it all the way to this point, I hope I was able to show you how vital Flash truly was to not only the internet at large, but to the individual minds of millions, a platform that defined a generation. With all that being said, thank you guys for your time, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. I'm gonna go back to browsing Flashpoint now. See you guys later.